In this video, we'll discuss GST implication on employee-related transactions. As per the definition of supply in the CGST Act, GST is levied on all forms of supply of goods or services or both. However, there is a Schedule 3 to the CGST Act which specifies certain transaction activities are not to be treated as supply of goods or supply of services. Entry 1 to this Schedule 3 covers the services rendered by the employee to the employer in the course of employment is not to be treated as supply of services. We need to understand the scope of this entry. What is covered by Schedule 3 is that the services rendered by employee to the employer will not to be treated as supply. So when the employer pays a consideration to the employer, it is not leviable to tax. So employer pays the consideration in two forms, one monetary, another non-monetary. Monetary consideration is include like wages, salary, bonus, allowances. Non-monetary consideration includes all types of perquisites like rent-free accommodation, canteen facility, transport facility, etc. The consideration may be fixed. Some element of the consideration may be fixed, some may be variable. The principle of dominant intention, that test is given by the Supreme Court in BSNL case, that when there is an employer and employee relationship, employee is working under a supervision of employer, then any amount paid by the employer in return to the services rendered by the employee is covered by this entry. Whether that amount is monetary, non-monetary, fixed, variable. Now coming to the next part is Section 15. Section 15 of the CGST Act gives the definition of related person. There it covers employer and employee are deemed to be related persons. Then there is a Schedule 1 to the CGST Act which specifies that certain transaction and activities are deemed to be treated as supply even if made without consideration. So the transaction between related person or distinct person, even if it is without consideration, are deemed to be supply. Further, it provides that a gift by the employer to the employee per head per year not exceeding up to 50,000 rupees will not be considered as supply. We will understand this. What is the purpose of this entry? Now, let's coming to the part that the various facility provided by the employer to the employee. These facilities are provided in return to the services rendered by employee to the employer in the course of employment. This is a consideration to the employees for the services rendered by them to the employer. Just because there is a facility by the employer to the employee, that does not mean there is a supply. That does not mean that it is covered by Schedule 1 of the CGST Act. When certain facilities are provided by the employer, for example, a canteen facility is provided or a transportation facility to the employee has been provided, employer incurs certain cost that is accounted as a staff welfare expenses. Further, that is allowed as deduction under Section 37 of Income Tax Act. So these facilities are basically a consideration to the employees for the services they rendered to the employer. Employer is not providing a service of canteen. Employer is not providing or making a supply of canteen or providing a service of transportation. This is wrong interpretation. Now coming to the next part, that for 2 minutes, let's assume that we are saying that these facilities is a supply as per by reading Section 15 with Schedule 1 of the CGST Act. It is correct to say that the insurance service is supplied by the employer to the employee. Suppose the employer has taken a life or health insurance of the employee. Generally, this is a transaction, this is a practice in the industry that the employer takes life or health insurance of the employee. That does not mean that the employer has provided a service of insurance to the employee. Because entity can provide a service of insurance only after registration with IRDA. Suppose an internet service is given. Suppose the internet facility is provided by the employer to the employee. That does not mean that the employer has provided a service of internet to the employees, because the entity needs to take a license from DOT, Department of Telecommunication, to provide this facility, to provide this service. Then canteen facility, there needs a certification from FSSA to provide a canteen facility to the employees. If we assume this is a single transaction, so if we are saying in a GST this is a supply, then these are the legal consequences. We cannot say that this is not that for the purpose of IRDA, this is not a service provided by the employee to the employer, but for the purpose of GST, this is a service provided by employer to the employee. No, this is wrong interpretation. These are, again I am saying, are the facilities provided by the employer to the employee in return of their services in employment. Suppose we assume for a moment that rent-free, generally companies are having this policy to provide rent-free accommodation to the manager, directors, etc., who are their employees. Suppose when we are saying that this rent-free accommodation provided by the employer to the employee is a supply, assume for a moment, then this residential rent accommodation is an exempt supply. So by going by this interpretation of the GST law, the common credit cover by rule common credit needs to be reversed by the entity as per rule 42 and 43 of the CGST Act. Therefore, this is a facility provided by the employer to the employee in return of the services provided by the employee to the employer, which is covered by Schedule 3 of the CGST Act, which is not to be treated as supply of services. Now, what is this? Now, there is a question that what is then this Schedule 1, Entry 2? Schedule 1, Entry 2 cannot be read in isolation. It first has to be satisfy the condition of Section 7 of CGST Act. It has to be a supply first and then go to the Schedule 1. When the employer provides a facility that is in relation, that is a consideration to the employees for the purpose, in return of their services rendered, then it is not a supply. When it is not a supply, there is no question to refer to Schedule 1. Schedule 1 is subject to Section 7. You cannot read Schedule 1 in isolation. It has to be supply first. There is no supply from employer to employee. Then there is no need to refer Schedule 1. Then what is this? You may have a question that what is this entry of Schedule 1? Let's take an example. That there is a vehicle which is getting manufactured in Tamil Nadu, Chennai. That company is having a showroom in Delhi. So all the input tax gets accumulated at Tamil Nadu factory. The sales is from branch which is in Delhi. So ITC is accumulated in Tamil Nadu. GST liability is in Delhi. In order to avoid this, you need to refer Schedule 1 Entry 2, that is supply from Tamil Nadu to the branch, is deemed to be a supply even if without consideration the ITC will get transferred from factory to showroom, and showroom will then make a GST liability payment by utilizing the ITC. In this way, we need to read Schedule 1. Just because there are common employees, that does not mean that it is covered by Schedule 1. We need to understand the each and every entry in the Schedule 1 in a right perspective. So the summary, that when any facility is provided by the employer to the employee that is covered by Schedule 3, it is not to be treated as a supply. It is in return to the services rendered by employee to the employer. It is a consideration paid by the employer to the employee, maybe in the form of non-monetary. It is a facility given. Just because there is a facility provided, that does not mean there is a supply. Employer is not doing any supply of canteen service, any supply of transportation service to the employees. He provided the facility to the employees. That is in return to the employment service. So therefore, it is covered by Schedule 3. You don't have to refer Schedule 1. Even if there is a recovery, in some companies, there is a policy that nothing will be given free. So suppose there is a recovery. It means what? It means the employer is saying my cost of employment is this much. Let's take an example that in that a canteen facility is provided. Per meal cost is 100. Employer is saying that I will pay 75. Employee needs to pay 25 rupees. So there is a recovery from the employee's salary to the extent of 25 rupees per plate. It means the employer is saying that my cost of employment is 75 rupees. Just because there is a 25 rupees recovery, that does not mean that the employer has started supplying a canteen service. Okay. Now coming to the next part, that while providing these facilities to the employees, the ultimate service provider, for example, a canteen service provider or a transportation service provider, levy the GST. As per section 17(5), the GST credit is not available on food and beverages, life insurance, health insurance, rent-a-cab services, etc. The credit is blocked. However, if it is provided in section 17(5) of the CGST Act that if that service, that facility needs to be provided to the employee under a particular act. Let's take an example that under Factories Act, if it is a requirement that the canteen facility needs to be provided to the employee, then the ITC is available. Now take an example, just what we saw, that suppose there is a 100 rupees per meal cost and the company is having a policy that nothing will be given free. Employer is ready to pay 75 rupees, 25 rupees is recovered from the employee. That does not mean that due to recovery there is a supply that we saw. However, while taking the ITC, employer needs to take the proportionate ITC, not the complete ITC, because employer effectively paid only 75 rupees. 25 rupees is recovered from the employee. So to the extent of the cost, proportionate ITC is to be availed. Just because there is a recovery, that does not mean that the employer has provided the services. If this is accepted, that due to recovery, there is a service by the employer, canteen service by the employer, then you need to refer section 15, which further trigger the complications of open market value, because employer and employee are treated as related persons. Therefore, again I am repeating that if the canteen facility is to be provided to the employee as per Factories Act and some amount is recovered from the employee, then a proportionate ITC is to be availed, not the complete ITC. Because you're not paid, employer has not incurred that cost, so he is not eligible for the full ITC. Now coming to the next part is a notice period recovery. For the first, no GST is payable on notice period recovery. But we need to understand why, from where it is coming, how we arrive at the conclusion that in case of on what GST is payable. GST is payable on the consideration for performance of the contract. Correct. What is notice period? Notice period recovery is what? Between employer and employee, there is an agreement, employment agreement, that in case you are leaving the company, you have to give 1 month notice. But if suppose employee is saying that, no, I will not wait for 1 month, I will pay the 1 month salary, allow me to leave, give me the relieving letter. It means what? The employee is breaching the contract. In return of the breach of the contract, employer is paying 1 month salary as a compensation for the damages caused to the employer due to breach of contract. GST is payable on the consideration for performance of the contract. When employee is not serving a notice period, it means he is breaching the contract. A breach of contract cannot be equal to the performance of contract. Any payment for breach of contract cannot be equal to consideration. Therefore, GST is not payable on notice period recovery. Afterwards, there is a clarification from the department, from the authority, that GST is not payable on the notice period recovery. Remember, when there is a clarification, it means the law was there from the day one. So no GST is payable on notice period recovery. Notice period recovery is not for performance of the contract. It is, on the contrary, compensation for breach of contract. Therefore, GST is not payable on the notice period recovery. Thank you. If you are having any questions relating to GST, you can send a mail to me or you can call me on my cell between 9:30 to 10 p.m. My cell number is 8080 980 684. Thank you.